Hello and welcome. Today my guest is Dinis Paiva. Can you please put a brief introduction so we can continue this lovely interview? Go for it.
What's going on, man? This is Dinis Paiva, CES MMA fighter, featherweight, bantamweight, whatever you want to call it.
No problem. When did you start your MMA run?
Pardon?
When did you start to train? As a kid or in high school or?
Dude, I boxed in middle school, and that got me into wrestling. And I did a lot of wrestling in high school. I was a state champion. I was an All-American. And I did a lot of wrestling all throughout high school. That's where I kind of started developing a love for mixed martial arts. At the time, Matt Hughes was the popular guy, and being a wrestler by background, it seemed like a great segue to kind of get into. Didn't get into MMA directly out of high school. It was a few years in between. But when I did, I kind of went all in. I got some kickboxing fights put in Florida. And then came up and started competing in MMA in Massachusetts. And it's been about 10 years since I made my pro debut at CES, and 20 plus fights later, and here I am, waiting for the next one.
Awesome. Do you have a dominant fighting style or you're a mixed martial artist?
I like to knock people out. So however that comes, man. I guess, I do train a lot. I'm a heavy boxer. By trade, and it, that's what I seem to be called now more than anything. But I do have that wrestling pedigree. So, yeah, if you want to call me a striker, you want to call me a brawler, a boxer, a wrestler, an asshole, whatever you want to call me, I'm here, man. I'm just trying to win fights and make a name for myself.
That's kind of controversial statement because of your nickname. You have one of the weirdest nicknames I've ever heard of. Can you please comment it?
Yeah. So I'm Portuguese, and
Yes.
The Portuguese it's in the background. The Portuguese are really well known for this type of bread they bake, sweet bread, and that's it happened to be in the gym. I went through a series of different nicknames. So one of my coach was strong. He's like, "You need a nickname, and we got to get you a name that's Portuguese based because you're so Portuguese." And no matter how much I begged and I pleaded not to be called that. Eventually, the name found a way, and yeah, it stuck. They say a really good nickname you don't choose for yourself. It's something that's chosen for you, and that's it's been the case.
Yeah, awesome. Never heard of something like that though, but it's kind of, never heard such a nickname, but it sounds cool, just it's a bit weird. Who are your coaches?
So I work with a series of different coaches. I work with Triforce MMA, Pete Jeffrey. He's my head MMA coach. I work with Jose Santos out of Full One Boxing. He's my primary strength and conditioning coach and my boxing coach. There are other few intermediate coaches that mix in between. But like my head guru guy is a guy by the name of Mike Gresh. Local Lobo is his nickname. Black belt in jiu-jitsu. The guy competed in MMA himself. 47 years of age. He was a regional title holder. But he's kind of like a Northeast MMA guru, if you will. And he's brought a lot of really high-level coaches, everybody from Mark Delagrati to Daniel Gracie. He's brought a lot of those guys together. So he's been a mentor and a father figure in my corner for a while. And that's a few of the names, man. But, yeah, we try to keep things live, and we work with a lot of the other coaches. Joe Lozon, I'm in his gym quite often for sparring. And again, going to St. Yotong and working with Mark Delagrati in his camp up there.
Do you have favorite strike and favorite submission?
Favorite strike is fist to face. It's the one that lands. Yeah, I know. There's no favorite thing. I mean, I guess the best weapon any fighter can have is a jab, right? I think one of the most effective striking tools is a very efficient jab. It can stop a lot of forward pressure. It can put a wrestler in his tracks. You could really put a lot of pressure on a guy that's not used to moving backwards, counter boxers. If you're able to feed punches off that jab. So if I had to choose, I guess the lead hand, the jab would be the number one tool.
All right. Can you discuss your tattoos?
My tattoos.
Can you elaborate their meaning?
Man, I got a bunch of tattoos, man, and they all have different meanings. I got an angel on my rib cage. I got for a grandmother of mine that passed away quite some years ago, and it was kind of incomplete. And then I had another very close friend of mine that was killed, and I got it completed a few years after that. So it's kind of a memorial tattoo. I have a Samoan tribal tattoo on my left leg. It's about half of my leg at this point. I have Ezekiel 25:17 from Pulp Fiction, that famous passage that Samuel L. Jackson quotes before he kills everybody. I got that tattooed on my left pec. I got my family coat of arms on my right pec. Got my family coat of arms on my left arm. Two different sides of the family, my mother's and my father's. And yeah, man, I just had it up. There's more to come. So we'll have to continue the conversation.
Yeah, I assume there are more to come. I've seen many tattoos, but you have a lot of them, and it's kind of hard to catch them all.
Every time you see me fight, there's more tattoos, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, honestly. Can we discuss your amateur MMA debut? How did it go?
It did not go well. I'll tell you that much. It did not go well. I lost. I fought a guy named Eddie Lee, and he beat me by rear naked choke. And I remember, like, it was so weird because, like, you're never really prepared for it unless you come up with an established camp and you get the right training and you manage well. And a lot of guys don't really have that, right? A lot of guys have to kind of come in, especially amateur wise. They gotta fall a few times before they really learn how to get up and running. But if you're surrounded by a good camp and there's a lot of professional fighters that can kind of mentor you in the right way. For me, it was not so much. I spent the majority of my amateur and a good portion of the first segment of my professional career training out of a garage with one trainer and very minimal training partners. And I was just kind of just doing more of like a martial artist meets MMA fighter kind of thing, where we did a lot of JKD was a primary training art that we practiced a lot. When it came to my amateur debut, I fought a guy he fought out of Sityatong, which is actually one of the camps I train out of, a place I call home now. He was surrounded by the professional camp, so he kind of had everything going. But for me, no clue what was going on. I got in that cage. I punched him in the face twice. Couldn't even believe, like, when I landed, I had to, like, look at my fist because I couldn't believe I landed the punch. And then got taken down and got rear naked choked. No clue how to defend. But even though I lost, I knew right there and then that was it. Like, I wanted to do nothing else but be a fighter. Like, I couldn't accept losing, although I lost again on the very next fight.
Which was your toughest amateur rival? Who was, actually?
Rico DeSulo. So he's a standout professional fighter. He's fought in the Contender Series. It was his last fight out. Guy I trained with and been close with for years, but he called me with a TKO as an amateur. I had fought, it was my third fight in the course of 4 weeks. So I fought 1 week. Exactly 2 weeks later, I fought again. And exactly 2 weeks after that, I fought again. And I ran into Rico at the end of that 4-week stint.
Can we discuss your professional debut? First of all right, we will discuss the opponent and so on. But all right, it's professional debut. So it's a big step forward. How did you feel mentally, physiologically, physically, and so on? And then describe about your opponent. Go for it.
So I fought a guy named John Marcheterre. He was a boxer. I knocked him out in the first round. I opened up the fight with some leg kicks. Mentally, I felt great. The arena was completely dead. I think it was like 12 people when I fought, so I really just kind of fought in front of my friends and my family. But that was with CES, and I was the first fight of the night. You're always kind of nervous, right? Making that pro debut, you really want to get off on the right foot. And coming off a loss on my amateur debut, I wanted to make sure that I didn't leave any room for error. So it was nice. I got in and out within 2 minutes. Scored a first round knockout, TKO, I believe what they called it. And I fought a primarily boxer that was open to leg kicks, and that's kind of opened up the blow that set him down to the ground, and then it was a bunch of ground and pound shots after that finished him.
What happened against Clifford Moulton, that illegal knee?
Oh, poor Cliff, dude. Oh, man, that was a bad one. Again, this is If I could turn back the wheels of time, man, I think I would have stood an amateur a bit longer and got more groomed. But you live and you learn. So with Cliff Moulton, that poor guy, I get disqualified in that fight. It was a fight that if you watch the fight, it's on YouTube. You can watch it for yourself. I got bleached blonde hair and short red shorts. You can't miss me. I was beating up that kid pretty good in the first round. I caught him with a good uppercut in the clinch, and I spun him around and got down on the ground. And I proceeded to drop bombs on him for the ground and pound. I was waiting for Kevin McDonald. He was the referee that was in there. And I was waiting, and I'm looking up at Kevin, waiting to stop the fight. And instead of finishing the fight and really, getting the ref to pull me off, I loosened up a little bit. The kid spun around. He got back to his feet. He kind of clinched in, shot in for a takedown, desperation. We kind of clinched up. We were both on our knees. I sprung up to my feet. I felt space. I felt like Cliff Moulton was coming up with me. I felt like he was off the ground. And I threw the knee right to his head. Well, Cliff Moulton was still grounded. I did some damage to his orbital, broke his orbital or something like that, and basically just knocked him out right there and then. And because it was an illegal blow, he was still grounded. I was then disqualified.
In one of your next fights, I don't know to pronounce this guy's name. His last name is Santos. You finished him via north-south choke. I don't see that much often. So how did you secure that choke? It's kind of hard choke to establish.
I'll be honest, man. It was more of a squeeze than anything. He was Gilvano Santos, Brazilian kid. He was a real Taekwondo guy. He was on the Brazilian Taekwondo team, so he had real flashy kicks and he moved side to side really well. Yeah, man, that was just a wrestling tactic, man. And when I got his neck into the pit of my arm, I just squeezed with everything I had. And I don't even think it was so much a choke. I just think it was more of a neck crank, and he tapped from that.
Oh, it was more like a neck crank. Then against Joe Cushman, it was one very, very quick win. 45 or 44 seconds. Or 54, something like that.
40 something seconds, 49 seconds, 42 seconds, something like that. And so I tell people all the time that was for me, that was the most pivotal fight of my career, I think, because at the time I was 4-7 and Joe Cushman was 11 and I was 4-5 and Joe Cushman was 11-5. So he had, a lot more fighting experience and he had a lot more wins. He had a winning record. He was ranked. It's just on paper, it was a really bad fight. And back to my one of my coaches, Loco, Mike Resch, he knew that I could beat him. So when the fight got offered on the table, we jumped right at it because we knew on paper it was a bad matchup, but we knew that we matched up really well with Joe Cushman. He was kind of chinny. He was kind of at the end of his career. The height and the reach advantage was going to play a big part, in which it ended up doing really well. But yeah, I mean, a 49-second first-round knockout, and it put me to 500. Right, I got to they got me to 5-5, which led into the Matt Doherty fight, where I finally broke 500. I finally had a winning record for the first time in my professional career was after beating Matt Doherty.
Yeah, Matt Doherty was an express fight, 10 seconds, right?
About that, it's like 7 seconds.
7.
7 seconds, yeah. If you go back and watch it, honestly, the knockout was in 4 or 5 seconds. But by the time I stopped the fight, it was 7 seconds.
Yeah, but it was very, very fast knockout. What was the blow? I forgot. I watched the fight, but I forgot. What was the strike?
It was a combination, right? So I fainted. I fainted. I think I threw a lead hook cross, lead uppercut cross again, and one of the punches missed, but it was the lead uppercut that put him out. And he's a great guy, man. Matt Doherty's a tough kid. He did a lot of boxing and some kickboxing after that. I don't think he's ever fought in MMA again, but he's good people.
Jordan Espinosa is now a UFC guy and you defeated him. Well, that's a big success.
Yeah. I mean, I think he's gotten better. I think Jordan's gotten. I think I've gotten better as well. Yeah, I'm a fan. He's had success. He went down to 125, which is a better weight division for him. But yeah, it's one of those things where I could, a UFC fighter right now, I could say that I beat. But, you know how fighting is, man. You fight the same guy today, you fight him next week. You might beat him one day, he might beat you the next day. It was a close fight. But, yeah, I mean, it was a good win overall.
Andre Ewell was my guest here, and what can you say about your fight with Mr. Highlight? I've got to say that he said very positive thing about fighting you. What do you think of that fight?
Yeah, man, it was a great fight. Obviously, it sucked. I really wanted the belt. I had been with CES for so long. I really, really wanted the belt. I thought I had him in the second round. He was so close to tapping out at the end of the second round. If you got to watch the fight, at the end of the second round, it almost looked like he tapped. You can hear the comment that say it almost looked like you all tapped, and I didn't secure it. I didn't secure it enough. I didn't squeeze enough, and then 2 weeks later, on top of that, I'm the main event for the first time ever fighting for CES. Finally fighting for a belt. Lose the way I did, right? Winning a fight. I thought the first 2 rounds I had won quite handily, and then getting caught with a guillotine third and a Darsh ninja choke, whatever it was in that third round. It sucked, man. But at the same time, when you got signed to the UFC 2 weeks later, and then eventually ended up beating Renan Barao, I felt better, right? Because I sat there and I said, okay, here's a guy who's obviously, he deserves to be in the UFC. He just beat the ex-bantamweight champion of the world. A lot worse than he beat me. And I felt, at least that's the way I felt. And I was actually proud. And I've been friends and I've been a follower and a fan of Andre since. And to see the work he's put in the UFC since and wins he's put together, it's great, man. So it sucks losing. It's never a good thing, but I've learned a lot from it. I've gotten a lot better from it. And I just feel like my time is coming. My time to the UFC is coming. I think it's just a few short, big wins away.
So, did you recover after that fight, and how did your match against Antonio Castillo Jr. go?
It went pretty good, right? I mean, first round knockout. Moving up to 145, right? I had fought at 135. Majority of my career has been at 135, and I still want to get back down to 135. I think more now, as I feel like I'm getting older and like the window is getting smaller and smaller. I feel like my best odds of getting to the UFC are at 135. My manager and my coaches, a few of them on the opposite side, they think I perform better at 145. But the way I look at it is I'm just continuing to take the right fights, whether they be at 135 or 145. I'm going to continue to fight in a healthy, happy place until the right money and the right opportunity comes along. I have goals on getting back down to 135 and competing for that CES belt once again, and I'm going to get that belt, and I'm going to make that walk to the UFC eventually.
Absolutely. How did your last fight go? Are you satisfied?
Yeah, I mean, tough kid, man. Tim Dooling's tough kid. He went all 3 rounds of map to set. UFC veteran, CES MMA champion, Bellator veteran. He's a tough kid, and it was one of those things where I felt like again, the size factor, like where I have that finishing knockout power at all times at 135. When I'm fighting bigger guys at 145, because I'm not a big 45, especially if they're durable and they're tough like Tim was, and is, I don't know. Satisfied, yes. A lot to learn. We're still running back tape and still picking apart things. So I'm always very critical of my own performances. Even when I win, I'm not exactly happy. So anybody ever asks me, man, I'm always trying to get better. There's always room to improve. No matter how I win, it could be a 7-second knockout. Well, I could have fainted differently. I could have done something a little bit better, or however so. But there's always room to get better. So I'm satisfied because I got the win, yes. Could have been a better performance, by all means, yeah.
There were Portuguese fighters in Bellator FC, but I'm unsure whether there was a Portuguese guy in UFC. I'm thinking now, but I don't think there was a Portuguese guy in the UFC. Can you correct me, please, if I'm wrong?
We gotta get one. This is gonna be the first guy here.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of Pedro Cavallo, though. Portuguese guy fighting for Bellator featherweight. Fan of him. I'm also a fan of Andre Filho. He fought for Bellator for a while. He also fought in the PFL this past season. The Portuguese are slowly starting to make their way into the game. the sport is opening up everywhere, all over the world, and a lot of countries are coming in. A lot of the athletes in other countries are giving it a chance. So we'll see more in time. If I'm not the first Portuguese fighter to make it to the UFC, more will come.
I watched some Portuguese fighters, the ones you mentioned, and I also looked. Was it Falconeto Lopes? I think that's his name.
Oh, I gotta look out for him.
Yeah. So right now, what do you think? What is the greatest problem? Why no Portuguese fighter has ever competed in the UFC? What do you think? Why there was no Portuguese guy in the UFC yet?
Too much soccer. Everybody wants to kick balls that are kicking guys' asses. That's how it works, man. It's. I mean, and you see it in certain countries, right? You gotta look at Dagestan. Right, Dagestan is such a small country. Wrestling in sambo is so prominent in judo. That's all those guys have. And right now, the only thing that segues from sambo and from judo and from wrestling right now is MMA. And since Khabib got a shot to put his people in the mix and show like they got fight. Conor did the same thing when Conor made it to the UFC. He brought a bunch of Irish guys over from SBG, and he brought his crew of people with them and gave them a shot. Matter of fact, Pedro Cavallo is from SBG. Trains with John Kavanagh. But I think it's one of the circumstances. I mean, you look at you're looking at it right now, right? With what is that? The kickboxing team where Israel Adesanya is fighting out of with his camp. I mean, they got a few champions. Now everybody understands that kickboxing camp out of Australia, they're good enough to compete, right? So they're gonna start pulling in more Australians. And then next thing you know, Francis Ngannou is going to open up a UFC PI center in the middle of Africa somewhere. And the next thing you know, you're going to get all these African-born fighters coming in, pouring in, and doing well. So I think it's just a matter of time before you get one or two big-name Portuguese fighters in, and then the rest will follow from there. It's just not the most popular sport in the country.
Yeah, the same situation in my country. People even don't know, believe me or not, if you stop a normal people in the street. Alright, for MMA they know. If you say KFC, they look through you.
But they probably know who Conor McGregor is though, right?
They do, but for example, bare knuckle fighting, for example, they are asking, they know what's boxing, but for bare knuckle, you ask what is bare knuckle, they are like, who is Caleb Harris, who is Jim Allers, they have no idea.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a new sport, right?
Yes.
Maybe once they get somebody they know that fights in that sport, they'll start following and going from there.
Yeah, unfortunately so. Would you like to add something? Is there something that we missed in this interview, and maybe you would like to greet something, to say something?
Oh, dude, I just want the coronavirus to be over. I just want to get back to living my life, myself, and for the rest of the world. There's a lot of people out there who aren't making ends meet, and I just want. And I hope and I pray that this time passes for everybody. This isn't a thing that chooses race, color, religion, age. It's everywhere, all over the world. And I just hope that we stay strong and God willing, it passes in due time. I just want to get back to living my life. And I know I'm not the only one. I know the whole world feels this way in a certain sense. But one thing's for sure: when I get back to that cage, the performance of my lifetime will be held.
I'm sure about that too. This is the worst enemy we have ever fought. I mean, an invisible enemy. You don't see him, and it's terrible. Yeah, I hope it will end too. And I hope you will be the first Portuguese guy to step in the UFC. I mean, Portugal deserves the innovator, The innovators are remembered forever, so that's what I believe is going to happen. Thank you so much for this interview. I will publish it tomorrow, just to know, because it's pretty much late in my state now. I'm going to sleep and I will publish it tomorrow.
All right, sounds good, man. I just got to work now, so I'm going to get cleaning some leaves in my backyard, but I really appreciate your time on. Thank you for having me on, and stay tuned, man. More to follow.
No problem. We will talk another time for sure when this pandemic ends.
All right, man. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.